So I want you to imagine that it's 1922. You are Carl Jung, the prominent psychiatrist.
Right, living in Zurich.
Yeah, exactly. You're in Zurich. You have this thriving clinical practice. You're constantly going to lectures, and you're just totally immersed in that really vibrant, noisy coffee house culture of the time.
Which sounds great, honestly.
It does. But you have a problem. You are trying to develop this completely radical new school of analytical psychology. And to do that, you need to intellectually spar with your former mentor, the Titan himself, Sigmund Freud.
Right. Which is, I mean, that's not exactly something you can do while casually chatting over a cappuccino.
Exactly. So you go to the woods. Jung actually built this rustic two-story stone house in the village of Bollingen. No electricity, just oil lamps.
Wow.
Yeah, and a private office where literally no one was allowed in without the key. And the really crucial thing here is that Carl Jung didn't build a rustic stone tower to escape work. He built it to master it.
That's a huge distinction.
Right. And that state of intense, isolated focus, that's what Cal Newport calls deep work. And in today's deep dive into his research, we are going to show you exactly how mastering this specific type of focus is really the ultimate shortcut to becoming invaluable in today's economy.
Yeah, and we'll break down the exact rules to, actually train your brain to do it. Because it takes training.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is the difference between deep work and, well, what most of us are doing every day?
Well, so Cal Newport defines deep work as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration.
Yeah.
And this pushes your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit.
So it's hard.
Very hard. These are the efforts that create new value. They improve your skills, and frankly, they're notoriously hard for someone else to replicate. It's the heavy lifting of the knowledge economy.
Right. As opposed to shallow work, which is the trap I think most of us fall into.
Oh, absolutely.
That's all the logistical stuff. The non-cognitively demanding tasks you can do while, half distracted. Answering routine emails, sitting in those status meetings that definitely could have been an email.
Shuffling data around in spreadsheets while listening to a podcast.
Exactly.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And to understand why that distinction matters so urgently for you right now, you really have to look at what's happening to the economy structurally.
Right. The macro view.
Yeah. At MIT, economists Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee have mapped out what they call the Great Restructuring. Basically, intelligent machines and global networks are radically dividing the labor market.
Okay, so how does that break down?
Well, they've found that three specific groups of people are going to win big in this new world. The first group is the high-skilled, so people who can wrangle massive, complex systems.
Like a data scientist building predictive models.
Exactly. The second group is the superstars, the absolute best in their field. Because if a company in Chicago can hire the single best remote programmer in the world living in Spain, they will.
Why wouldn't they?
Right. And the third group is the owners. Basically, the people with the capital to actually invest in these new technologies.
Okay, so let me synthesize this. Basically, if I'm not writing the advanced code, and I don't happen to have $1 billion to buy server farms, I'm just going to be left behind.
Well, I mean, that is the harsh reality of the restructuring. Assuming you aren't an owner, your only path to thriving is to join the high-skilled or the superstars.
No pressure.
Right. But joining them requires two core abilities. First, you have to be able to quickly master hard things. Technology shifts way too fast to just, learn one skill in your 20s and coast until retirement.
That's so true.
And second, you have to be able to produce at an elite level in terms of both quality and speed.
And here's the kicker, right? Both of those abilities rely entirely on your capacity for deep work. I actually want to push on the underlying mechanism here because it's purely biological.
Neuroscience side of it.
Yeah. When you focus intensely on a specific task, you are forcing a specific neural circuit in your brain to fire. And as that circuit fires over and over, these cells, they're called oligodendrocytes, start wrapping layers of a fatty tissue called myelin around those neurons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's exactly like adding physical rubber insulation to a bare copper wire. It allows the electrical signals in your brain to fire faster and much cleaner.
Which is literally the neurological foundation of skill acquisition. I mean, to be great at something, to master a hard skill, is quite literally to be heavily myelinated.
Right. So think about what happens when you try to learn like a complex coding language, but you have a browser tab open to social media and your phone is constantly buzzing.
You're distracted.
Yeah, it's like trying to build massive biceps by lifting a pencil. You are firing way too many random neural circuits at once to isolate that specific pathway and trigger that myelination process.
That's a great analogy.
If you want a visceral, real-world example of doing this right, you have to look at the story of Jason Ben.
Oh, I love this story.
Yeah. He was a financial consultant making about $40,000 a year, and one day he just realizes his entire job could be automated by a slightly complex Excel macro.
Which is a terrifying realization for anyone, especially in finance.
Truly. So what did he do? He didn't just casually start watching coding tutorials on the weekends. He actually quit his job.
Just quit outright.
Quit outright. And he locked himself in a room with 0 computers, just textbooks, note cards, and a highlighter.
Because he had to build the focus muscle first.
Exactly. He realized he had to physically train his brain to focus for hours a day before he could even touch the keyboard. And once he built that focus muscle, he went to a brutal coding boot camp, graduated atop of his class, and landed a job as a developer at a Silicon Valley startup, making over $100,000.
He quite literally myelinated his way into a new tax bracket.
He really did.
But, that raises a massive paradox. If the ability to do deep work is so economically valuable, if it's the very thing that drives massive salary leaps and innovation, why are modern businesses seemingly doing everything in their power to destroy it?
Seriously?
Right. I mean, we see the rise of giant, noisy, open-plan offices. We see corporate mandates to be constantly active on instant messaging platforms like Slack or Teams.
It makes absolutely no sense. If I'm a CEO, why am I paying my best people to sit in a giant room where they just get interrupted every 3 minutes?
Well, it happens because of a phenomenon we can call the metric black hole. There was this fascinating study by Tom Cochran. He was an executive at Atlantic Media. He actually ran the hard numbers on how much time his employees spent just processing internal emails.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
Yeah. When he factored in their salaries, their typing speeds, and just the sheer volume of messages, he realized the company was spending over $1 million a year, essentially paying people to act as human network routers.
$1 million just for email.
Just for email. But the core problem is that in knowledge work, it is incredibly difficult to measure the exact bottom line impact of these daily behaviors. An assembly line worker can point to exactly how many widgets they made that day, right? An academic can point to their publication index.
But a marketing manager or a strategist.
Exactly. The metrics are totally murky. And in the absence of clear metrics, human beings instinctively fall back on the principle of least resistance. We just do what's easiest and most visible in the moment.
Which creates this culture where busyness becomes a proxy for productivity. Like, if I don't know how to mathematically prove to my boss that I'm doing a good job, I'll just make sure she sees me responding to emails at 9 p.m., or I'll be the loudest voice in the strategy meeting.
Exactly. You just perform work.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. What about someone like Jack Dorsey? He famously ran both Twitter and Square simultaneously. He didn't lock himself in a room with oil lamps.
No, he did not.
He just wandered around, open stand-up desks. So when you glance at your inbox for, just a second, while writing a complex report, your brain starts subconsciously processing the implications of those emails. When you turn back to the report, you are operating with severely dampened cognitive performance.
And the antidote to that residue is aggressive batching. Look at Adam Grant, who became the youngest full professor at the Wharton School of Business. He didn't just casually write research papers between his classes or during office hours.
What did you do?
He batched his entire teaching load into one semester so he could isolate himself from multi-day pulses of deep research in the other. He understood a very basic but powerful formula. High-quality work produced equals time spent multiplied by the intensity of focus.
Wow. So by pushing the intensity to its absolute limit, he eliminated the attention residue and his output just skyrocketed.
Exactly.
So, okay, we know depth makes you incredibly productive and valuable. But if we're being completely honest, working with that level of intensity sounds exhausting. It sounds like a grind. Does this just turn us into hyper-efficient robots?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the exact opposite is true. The psychology shows that depth doesn't just make you productive. It fundamentally makes you happier.
Okay, there's this incredible story about a science writer named Winifred Gallagher. She received a really nasty advanced cancer diagnosis. And she made this profound decision. The disease desperately wanted to monopolize her attention, but she was going to actively choose to focus on her life instead.
Right, on the good thing.
Yeah, on walks, on movies, on a 6:30 martini. And she found that her life during that terrifying period was actually quite pleasant. She realized that, neurologically speaking, who you are is simply the sum of what you focus on.
That's beautiful. And it's so true. When you give rapt attention to a deep task, you are literally hijacking your brain's attention apparatus. You leave zero leftover processing power to notice the shallow, stressful, negative things that usually drag us down.
Like petty office politics.
Right, or anxiety about the future, or scam emails.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi actually proved this with his famous pager experiments. He beeped people at random times throughout the day to record their mood. And paradoxically, people were consistently happier at work, specifically when they were stretched to their limits in a flow state, than they were during unstructured free time on the weekends.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. So it sounds like our brains are actually wired to crave hard work over leisure, which just completely upends how we think about the weekend. Is that what philosophers mean when they talk about uncovering meaning?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That brings in the philosophy of craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Hubert Dreyfus and Sean Dorrance-Kelly argue that meaning in our modern world isn't something you just generate out of thin air. It is uncovered in the material you work with.
Like a sculptor or something.
Yeah. They use the example of Rick Furr, a blacksmith who spends hours painstakingly forging a Viking sword from crucible steel. The meaning is found in his deep, careful interaction with the metal. But this applies equally to a computer programmer trying to write an elegant string of code or a writer crafting a perfect sentence.
I really love that. It's not the wood that makes the wheelwright noble, it's the approach. You do not need some glamorous, world-saving job to find deep meaning. You just need to apply a craftsman's depth to whatever it is you do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so depth makes us valuable, and depth makes us happy. But how do we actually execute this? Because, look, I know myself. If I just try to will myself to focus on a hard spreadsheet, I am going to end up looking at Reddit 5 minutes later.
Of course. And you will fail every time because willpower is finite. The psychologist Roy Baumeister proved that your will is not a limitless character trait. It is literally a muscle that tires out.
So I can't just power through.
No. If you try to force yourself to work deeply while actively fighting off the urge to check social media in an open office, you will eventually lose. You have to design a physical and temporal system that protects your willpower.
Which brings up this amazing architectural concept by David Dewayne called the eudaimonia machine. It's a theoretical 5-room building designed purely to pull you deeper and deeper into focus.
It's such a cool concept.
Right. You walk into the first room, the gallery, which inspired you. Then you move into a salon for collaborative debate, then a library for research, then an office for your shallow work like emails. And finally, you enter the deepest room, completely soundproof, isolated, deep work chambers. The physical transition through those rooms systematically strips away your distractions and alters your cognitive state.
Now, since most listeners likely don't have a custom 5-room architectural marvel at their disposal,
Unfortunately.
you have to architect your schedule instead. And the research outlines 4 distinct depth philosophies you can choose from to do this.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first is the monastic philosophy. This is total, ruthless isolation. Think of Donald Knuth, the legendary computer scientist who famously stopped using email entirely in 1990.
Yeah.
Or Neil Stephenson, the sci-fi author, who is essentially unreachable. They just eliminate all shallow obligations.
Yeah, but let's be real. If I go monastic and stop answering my emails, my boss is going to fire me by Friday. That doesn't work for normal people.
Right, which is why the second option is the bimodal philosophy. This is Carl Jung in his Stone Tower, or Adam Grant batching his semesters. You divide your time clearly.
So chunks of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe you take a 4-day weekend of pure depth or a season of isolation, but then you return to the normal, highly connected world to handle your shallow obligations.
Still pretty tough for a normal 9-to-5er who can't just disappear for 4 days.
Fair enough. For them, there is the third option, the rhythmic philosophy. Jerry Feinfeld used this famously. He crossed out days on a calendar every time he wrote a joke, building a visual chain. His only job was, don't break the chain.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Or take Brian Chappelle, a busy dad working full-time who just woke up at 5:30 a.m. every single weekday to write his dissertation before the world woke up. It transforms depth into a simple, unbreakable daily habit.
That makes total sense. Just carve out the time when no one expects anything from you anyway. And what was the fourth one?
The journalistic philosophy. But, fair warning, This is for the highly practiced. Walter Isaacson wrote his massive 900-page book, The Wise Man, by just slipping away for 20 minutes here, an hour there, whenever a gap opened in his schedule. He had trained his brain to instantly drop into a deep state on command. Okay, so the question for you listening is, which of those four philosophies fits your actual life? But even once you pick one, how do you ensure you actually do the work?
Well, you borrow a framework from the business world called the 4 disciplines of execution. And the most crucial step here is tracking your lead measures on a physical scoreboard.
Meaning, don't track the final outcome, like pages written or sales closed, right? Because those are lag measures. By the time you measure them, the performance that drove them is already in the past.
Exactly. You track the behavior that leads to the outcome, keep a tally on your wall of the sheer number of hours spent in deep work. You can also leverage what's called the grand gesture.
Oh, I love the grand gesture. It's great. J.K. Rowling was struggling to finish the last Harry Potter book at home. There were dogs barking, window cleaners, kids, so she checked into a massive suite at the luxurious Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh.
Just totally changed her environment.
Right. Or Peter Shankman, an entrepreneur who bought a $4,000 round-trip business-class ticket to Tokyo just so he could write his manuscript on the plane without any internet access.
That is wild, but I get it. When you invest significant money or effort to change your environment, you dramatically raise the stakes. You signal to your brain that this task is of the utmost importance, so you can't afford to procrastinate. But, we also need to talk about the end of the day, because equally important to how you start your work is how you stop it.
Yes, you absolutely need a strict shutdown ritual. There is a psychological phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect. It basically states that incomplete tasks dominate our attention.
Right.
If you just slam your laptop shut at 5 p.m. while you're in the middle of a project, your subconscious brain doesn't know you're off the clock. It will keep fighting for your attention, running background processes on those unfinished tasks all night long.
Which is exactly why you feel so burned out even when you're supposed to be relaxing. To combat this, you have to create a shutdown algorithm. At the end of the day, check your emails one last time to make sure nothing is on fire, review your task lists, make a rough plan for tomorrow, and then, and this is the key part, actually say a set phrase out loud.
Literally say it.
Literally say, shutdown complete. It sounds incredibly cheesy, but the mechanism is powerful. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a task being done and a task being safely paused with a plan. Saying the phrase acts as a neurological save state, giving your brain permission to stop background processing.
Because if you don't fully recharge, your ability to do deep work the next day just plummets.
Yeah, but here's the harsh truth. Architecting your schedule and doing your shutdown rituals isn't enough if your brain is mush.
Yeah. If you carve out the time, but your brain is neurologically addicted to novelty and distraction, you will still fail.
Right. Which brings us to the hardest part, training the brain. We have to actively embrace boredom. There was this researcher at Stanford, Clifford Nass, who did incredible work studying chronic multitaskers. And he found that people who are constantly switching between apps, tabs, and devices literally lose the ability to filter out irrelevancy.
They just can't focus.
Their brains become rewired to expect constant stimuli. They are, in his words, mental wrecks.
And once your brain is wired for on-demand distraction, it craves it. You can't just suddenly decide to be laser-focused for 3 hours if you spent the last 3 years checking your phone every 5 minutes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. A lot of people try to fix this with an internet Sabbath. They take 1 day a week totally off screens. But taking 1 day off the internet is like eating a salad on Sunday and eating absolute junk food the rest of the week.
Yeah, you're still gorging on distraction most of the time.
Exactly. Cal Newport argues that instead of taking a break from distraction, you need to schedule breaks from focus.
That's a crucial paradigm shift. You schedule specific blocks of time where you are allowed to use the internet or check social media. And outside of those specific blocks, you keep your offline time absolutely sacred. If you are waiting in line at the grocery store, you don't pull out your phone, you just wait. You practice tolerating the friction of boredom.
Okay, but let's be real. If I'm standing in a 10-minute line at the DMV or sitting in a waiting room, you're telling me I should just stare at the wall. How does me being painfully bored at the DMV actually help me write better code or analyze data later?
Because it's concentration calisthenics. Every time you feel that slight twinge of boredom and you resist the urge to immediately pacify it with your smartphone, you are strengthening your brain's tolerance for lack of stimuli.
Building the muscle.
Exactly. Deep work is inherently difficult and often boring in its early stages. If
Yeah.
your brain panics and seeks a dopamine hit the second a task gets hard, you'll never achieve depth. You are training the muscle of sustained attention.
Wow. Okay, that actually makes perfect sense. And you can push this even further with specific brain training exercises. One of my favorites from the research is Roosevelt dashes. When Teddy Roosevelt was at Harvard, he had so many extracurricular hobbies he barely had time to study. So he would give himself artificial, hyper-intense deadlines to finish his schoolwork.
Sort of a manufactured urgency.
Right. If a paper usually took 3 hours, he'd force himself to do it in one. You attack a task with every free neuron until it gives way.
Another really powerful exercise is productive meditation. You take a period where you are occupied physically but not mentally, like walking the dog or commuting, and you focus your attention entirely on a single, well-defined professional problem.
I do that sometimes.
Yeah, but the key mechanism here is watching out for looping. When your mind gets tired, it will try to just endlessly rehash what you already know about the problem instead of pushing deeper into the unknown. When you catch yourself looping, you have to gently pull your attention back to the frontier of the problem.
Or you could try card memorization. There's a guy named Daniel Kiloff who was a struggling student with ADHD. He started training his memory using mental walkthroughs of his house to memorize decks of cards.
Oh, the memory palace technique.
Yeah. By doing this heavy lifting for his concentration muscles, he ended up graduating with first-class honors. The attentional control required to remember a deck of cards transfers directly to your ability to do deep work.
But all this neurological training is absolutely useless if you let network tools sabotage you at the finish line. We have to fundamentally abandon what's called the any benefit approach to social media.
Oh man, this is so common. It's the mindset of, well, I use Facebook because I might see a photo from a guy I went to high school with. You justify using an app because it offers one tiny speculative benefit, completely ignoring the fact that the tool is literally engineered by thousands of engineers to shatter your attention span.
The alternative is the craftsman approach. Think of a farmer like Forrest Pritchard deciding whether to buy a very expensive hay baler. He doesn't just ask, will this machine bale hay? Of course it will. He looks at the massive opportunity costs. Does this tool substantially positively impact his wildly important goals, or does it drain resources and time? You must apply that same strict, uncompromising criteria to every app and network tool in your digital life.
So what does this all mean for you? What stands out to you from this deep dive? For me, it's the realization that living a deep life isn't just some clever productivity hack to get a promotion. It is a fundamentally good life. Depth is economically lucrative, yes, but more importantly, it's neurologically fulfilling. It brings you a profound sense of peace and meaning in a world that is constantly trying to distract you.
It really does. And this raises an important question, and it leaves us with a fascinating, almost evolutionary thought to consider.
I love this part.
If the ability to perform deep work is becoming increasingly rare due to our devices, at the exact same time it is becoming increasingly valuable in our restructured economy, what if the next great leap in human evolution isn't technological at all? What if the future belongs entirely to those who choose to evolve into a new species of worker Homo sapiens depensis?
Homo sapiens depensis, the ones who can actually focus. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Don't just stay in the noisy, distracted coffee houses of your digital life today. Go out and build your own Bullington Tower.